What's up, guys? It's KB. Make sure you subscribe to the Underground Sports Philadelphia YouTube channel. Click the bell icon down below so you don't miss a single video from us. And thanks for tuning in to another video from Underground Sports Philadelphia. Now let's get into it.
Philadelphia, baby, you're gonna love it. Best sports fans in the world. Actually, the worst, but that's what makes them the best.
Welcome back to Top Bins, the show, bringing you all the action from England and Italy, the Premier League, and Serie A. I'm your host, Matt, joined by my co-host, Dom. Dom, how are you this afternoon?
Oh, it's a great Friday. It's an absolutely wonderful Friday. Work week's done. The weather could be a little bit nicer here. I don't know how it is down in Vineland right now, but
cloudy.
It's raining up here right now. So, aside, could be happier with my football team, but beggars can't be choosers.
You certainly are begging, that's for sure. Let's start in Italy, shall we? Because the league title, at least, has finally been settled, although realistically we've known since probably about late January that Napoli were going to win this title. It's more a question of when, not if. And they did have a slight little bump, right? They kind of cleared the schedule this past weekend, hoping that they would have the opportunity to clinch it, and they were not able to over Salernitana. So they had to wait to play Udinese on Thursday evening to actually clinch their third Serie A title. And it was a draw over Udinese, even that, it was not the most spectacular title-winning situation. I just think it's funny, Napoli that have been so dominant, that it kind of just goes with a little draw, and not going to say it's a whimper or anything, but it was not the most impressive way to win your title here.
Look, they have nothing else to really play for, right? They don't have a Copa. They don't have a Champions League. So, they know that they're going to win this eventually. So they're on cruise control. Credit to them. They were just waiting for the right moment. Yeah, it may have not been the most spectacular of win or of title wins, compared to the way Milan completely sold out Sassuolo Stadium themselves.
Well, Napoli, I don't know if you saw the post game, but it was a very Napoli.
No, it was there. But then I'm talking about, you didn't let me finish. You sell out the away stadium and you convincingly win. So, beggars can't be choosers, though. You're talking about your third Serie A title. The streets of Napoli are electric, right now.
Well,
so
electric in some bad ways too. There was a person killed, although the mayor said that, or the police chief, the equivalent of a police chief, said that they believe it was like unrelated completely. That it was just like a murder that was done at the time to knowing that there was a lot of chaos and a lot of distraction.
So it was a murder. It wasn't just like
No, yeah, someone was shot and killed, and they think it was a mafia related thing. Although someone was also apparently hit by a car and is in critical. There are some injuries, so hopefully everyone is celebrating a little more safely today and through the weekend, and for the next few weeks, because don't want that happening.
Knowing how passionate they are. And knowing what Philadelphia was like when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, I could only imagine what's going on right there.
Yeah, people treated for smoke inhalation because of all the smoke bombs and fireworks going off. People losing some fingers, I think, to some fireworks. So, let's be a little more responsible, huh? Let's be a little more responsible. But shout out to Napoli.
Yeah.
They've had such a dominant run this season.
They deserve it.
It's strange that they've cooled off in recent weeks, and we talked a little bit too about, obviously, like you mentioned, they don't have really anything else to play for, no Champions League. They're not in the Coppa Italia final. And I think part of it was because of how dominant they'd been in the league. There is just something to the fact that it's hard when you don't have that other competition to kind of push you, even if you don't intend it, right? I'm not saying these guys took their foot off the gas, but I think it's hard when you're not being pushed every week and you have that comfy advantage. That atmosphere and that sort of tension is just hard to manufacture if it's not actually being presented towards you. And there's a reason, right? Like if you look at a lot of like high profile athletic events, there's a reason that it feels like you get your best at the biggest moments. There's a reason that the new world records are set at the Olympics all the time, right? Because you're
Yeah.
doing it against the best competition in the highest stage and the highest stakes. And I think maybe Napoli had that issue this year where they weren't really being pressed very hard in the league, especially at the critical juncture, and maybe that's why. But all that said, they've had a fantastic year. Victor Osimhen, fantastic individual season. I think the question is going to be, can they continue this? Because the last few Scudetto winners in Italy have not really had an amazing second season. Milan are set to perhaps have one of the worst defending champion seasons ever, which sounds worse than it actually is. But they could finish outside of the top four, right? Juventus have not really obviously threatened since their title a few years ago. We kind of expected maybe Inter to kick on a little bit. It felt like maybe the beginning of an era, and it feels much more like that was actually sort of a blip rather than a more statistical anomaly more than anything more significant than that. Although Inter could, as we talked about, have a really fantastic season. So could Milan, of course. Even Juventus, I think, would consider a Coppa Italia, a Europa League, a pretty nice crown. But, those teams in Italy have not been as dominant as maybe you would expect. So it's hard for me to say Napoli will be back at this stage definitively next year, especially when you have someone like Osimhen's future up and down, Kim Min-jae, even Kvaratskhelia, who really knows, right? Like, I do think there are question marks as we return next year for Napoli.
Seeing how the season went on, you could definitely see there was a lot less parity between Napoli and the rest of the field. And Serie A, if Napoli didn't get off to such a hot start, Serie A would be one of the hottest, most competitive leagues right now when it comes to a title race. Like, if we're even talking about the title or the Champions League spots for 2 through 4, Lazio only has a 2-game lead on 7th place. So, a lot can still change within these next few match weeks. It's going to be very interesting seeing who could be in 2 through 4. Milan plays Lazio this weekend, so there could be a surprise shakeup in the standings and make a lot of things a lot closer. Juventus getting those 15 points back, it makes things. It makes fans of Inter, Atalanta, Milan, Roma kind of tense up a little bit because now they're back in the fray and they've been not the hottest team, but they got to win this week. So yeah. I mean.
It is good for Napoli, of course, too, because obviously you're guaranteed Champions League football with this win. They'll go into pot 1, which is big as well. Definitely gives you a little bit of an advantage. We talked about them as potential maybe dark horses for the Champions League this year. It didn't work out, but you hope that maybe next season you build on that performance. If there's a place that you're looking ahead towards for building, that is, I think, where
building off of their pretty good success in the Champions League this year. Anyway, I don't think people thought of them to get this far until they were so hot in Italy and they were so hot in Europe. In the group stage, they did get some pretty big wins. So, that's where they build. And I think that their success in the Champions League this year is what kept them so consistent in the league. They were confident. And when they saw that they were running away with it in the league, they knew that they were going to put good performances out there, and they just focused on Europe. So making the right additions to the squad, which I really feel that Napoli could do. I mean, look at the signings they brought in this year. Kim Min-jae and Kvaratskhelia, and those two guys were brought in on bargains, and they helped spearhead this team to this Scudetto. So, I mean, where can Napoli go? Just focus on Champions League, really.
I do think they'll regret, too, that Victor Osimhen got injured at just a really tough time this season. Didn't have him for that Milan Champions League tie. Milan were good in that tie, and they've shown that they clearly, even before those 3 games, they had a really good game against them earlier in the season. Milan have given them trouble, and Milan are rarely a club outside of Lazio that where they don't have typically are very competitive with the top teams in Italy. They're not a team that very often get run over. And I do think maybe again, they'll look back with some regret that Osimhen was missing time at just maybe a really pivotal point where the season could have. Now it's great, of course. It breaks a 33-year drought, and they fully earned that. But maybe it could have been a little bit more. But like you said too, even just making the Champions League quarterfinal for Napoli is big. They're not a team that has history with European competition. So to even be at that stage, to have won their group, and they had a very challenging group. there's a lot to take away. So they deserve to celebrate, but there's obviously big questions on how you build on this going forward in Italy when a lot of teams have not been able to really capitalize on title winning success. It's going to be very interesting to see who does win the title next year, because already I'm thinking ahead. There's 5 teams that I think theoretically, depending on how the summer goes, could be right. I think outside of Atalanta, you could convince me anyone wins the title. And I would believe it. Even Atalanta is like a potential dark horse. I don't know, but I would have to see it to believe it. But honestly, if you told me Napoli, Lazio, Juventus, Inter, Milan won, and even Roma as a potential,
Roma
right?
has
Depending on their transfer, it's all dependent on the summer, right, and what these teams do. But any of those teams, I think genuinely could win the title next year. So I am looking forward to seeing how that progresses.
I mean, there are big opportunities for teams like Milan and Inter to still get a lot of extra money for their transfer budget this summer with barring the success of each team in the Champions League. There's obviously a bonus that will come with getting to the final. And then if you win the final, think about that. That'll bring a lot of prestige to the club, have players want to sign and come play in Italy, which is good for Serie A just as a whole. Whoever ends up doing both the Champions League and decides to be competitive in the league. It's interesting because a lot of teams don't get a lot of money for their transfer budgets. Teams like Napoli and Lazio can't capitalize on the highest market value players all the time, like a Juventus, like an Inter can do. So it'll be interesting to see where the funds are and how they're allocated amongst the top 7 teams.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit too about the top 6 in Italy. Obviously, Napoli are going to be in the Champions League next year. We know that, but there's still a lot to be settled in the last few weeks here.
It's going to be interesting
in Serie A, and this weekend, by the way, is absolutely box office. It's unbelievable the top games that we have. Got Milan, Lazio, Roma versus Inter, Atalanta versus Juventus, Napoli versus Fiorentina, which would have been really fun too if Napoli had not secured the title by this point, because famously this was the team that they stumbled against when they were dueling with Juventus 5-6 years ago. It was sort of the reason they didn't already have this could have been their 4th Scudetto if things were a little different. But all of those teams have a lot to play for. You also have Atalanta to consider now, because they've been on a late season surge. They've looked a little bit like more their typical selves over the last few years. A team like Inter has really turned it on offensively. Lautaro Martinez just seemed to find his good vein of form. Even Lukaku's worked his way back on the team, looks healthy for the first time this year. He looked really fatigued and like beleaguered a lot this year. He did not look like his normal, not that he's like a fluid player, but he's always looked, he looks a little more fit now than he has at any point this season. And it's a good time to be peaking if you're Inter Milan. But all these clubs have a lot depending on this weekend and the next few weeks in Serie A.
It's funny you talk about a Lukaku. Yesterday was a jersey day for Spirit Week at my school. I wore a Milan jersey, and one of my old students came into my room. He's not the biggest soccer fan, but he was like, "Yo, I should have worn my jersey, my Lukaku jersey." And I'm like, "You're what?" He's like, "Yeah, I got a Lukaku jersey." Yeah, he's good, right? I was like, "You're a couple of years too late on that one."
Like sorta. I think the answer is sorta.
Yeah, this is what I want for this weekend. I love obviously a Milan win. I wouldn't mind a Roma win because Milan still has the head-to-head on them. So definitely have Inter lose. I'd like a draw versus Atalanta and Juventus. Don't need Juventus, increasing that gap or keeping that same point gap. Napoli, Fiorentina, it really doesn't matter there. I mean, Fiorentina could win, and we'd all like to see their success. So,
yeah. So, and I was just looking at the remaining fixtures just for the rest of the season. For both leagues, but here who has the easiest. This is according to Opta Stats, who has the easiest run in Italy, at least of the top 6 teams. Milan have the easiest by PowerPoint, and we talked about this, right? Because if you could not have
for them.
Right, yeah, sure, but you could not have handpicked really an easier schedule for them. They play 3 of the bottom
Yes.
4. They have a lot of good. Lazio also have the second easiest run in, and Lazio, it's not guaranteed, right? But they are already in a very good position to qualify for
Hmm.
the Champions League, which would be a big accomplishment for them. They've only been in it twice in the last 15 years, so it would be a really really nice thing to do if you're Lazio, right? And sort of raise the profile. I think Maurizio Sarri, what he's done. Probably a little under the radar, I think, for Lazio, like how good they've been this year. And that if they could have a Napoli-esque kind of leap next season, that is not out of the question for me. The hardest Inter actually have the hardest run in. They do have a very, very challenging schedule. You also add in the fact that they had the Champions League semifinal to worry about. I think you can get a little concerned if you're Inter, just because that is a brutal schedule. Fiorentina actually have the second hardest run in. Everyone else is sort of in the middle. But it is interesting that you have 3 teams in the top 6 with either the hardest or the 2 easiest run-ins, and then everyone else is sort of sprinkled in, in the middle of the bell curve, if you will. For this weekend, like I said, we've got Milan versus Lazio. Milan, destroyed by Lazio earlier this season. It was sort of a coming out party, I think, for Lazio. That was during a stretch of a lot of 4-0s for them. They've had that scoreline quite a few times this season. Roma versus Inter, I think 2 teams that are, at least in the last 2 weeks, have been moving in a little bit of opposite directions, and that Roma seem to be getting unlucky and can't find their way, whereas Inter are pulling off big comebacks against Lazio and are clearly finding some good form. Atalanta versus Juventus. Juventus struggling, especially since getting those 15 points back. Atalanta seems to have a fire lit under them. Those are the big ones I think to watch, and will set kind of the tone for the last few match weeks too.
And I'm looking at this Milan end of season schedule, and yeah, there's Spezia, Sampdoria, and Hellas Verona left. They draw Cremonese. I can't but they play 2 Milan derbies in a span of 6 days. That's such a crucial point in the season. Like, you've got to win both. You just have to win both. Because if Champions League isn't there for Milan in the league, they just have to go all the way and win it if they want to be in the competition next year. So it's do or die in both aspects, and I hate that. I hate
Has
it
it
so
hit you
much.
yet, the magnitude? Because I can't imagine having to play, say, Manchester United at a Champions League semifinal, or obviously, I really can't imagine ever playing in Everton there, right?
No, I haven't thought about it yet, but as it gets closer and closer and closer, yeah, I'm starting to.
I can remember, as a much younger man, a boy even playing Chelsea in the Champions League, and the way that felt, it's anxiety, and it takes up a level when it is a team that you are aware of domestically, and especially when it is, Inter and Milan. That's one of the biggest rivalries in all of European football. Not even just within Italy. I think it's one of the most recognizable fixtures. So
it seems as of recent, Inter has had the better of Milan as well. Like it just seems like Marcelo Brozovic always knows how to play his top game against Milan. Hakan Çalhanoğlu always has a chip on his shoulder, something to prove when he plays against them. So and guys like Matteo Darmian always seem to just get +10 to all their attributes when he plays against Milan. So it really, really bothers me. And having that smack dab in the middle of a run in the season, it's so annoying. But they've got to win them. They have to win them.
Yeah, so here's the last few Inter versus Milan fixtures across all competitions. It was a 1-0 win for Inter in early February over Milan in the league. They had also beaten Milan 3-0 in the Supercoppa in mid-January. Milan did have that early season. I remember this game, crazy win, 3-2 early in September when we were still thinking that there's going to be a Milan versus Inter title dash yet again. Going back to last year, Inter won 3-0 against Milan in the Coppa Italia. It's been pretty split. It's honestly a very even matchup over the last few years, especially. Sort of like each team take. I think that just speaks to both of these teams have been on pretty good spells over the last few years. Both of them have won a title within the last 3 seasons, and that's not often. But I am curious to see how that sort of will shape the rest of the season for both clubs, because like you said, it is incredibly important for both of them to be in the Champions League next year. I think it's more important for Inter actually, Like in terms of like a real financial situation, Milan will be tougher for them. But I think Inter really, really, really need to be in the Champions League. There's a lot of financial questions about Inter Milan that
This is
are
very true.
in the balance. So I think it's actually, if you're talking about the future of the club, maybe a little more important that they actually get it there. I saw this piece of news, too funny to pass up, to at least not give a mention. Armando Izzo charged and sentenced to 5 years for match fixing. This going back to his time in Serie B. In 2014, I believe. Still an appeal process to come, so it's not a guarantee that he'll actually serve this time. But a man on the Monza payroll, being
A Berlusconi boy, let's get it.
and he had already faced a ban for this within like a sporting sense, but this is a criminal offense. So, and he started that ban years ago. So I am curious to see what this appeal looks like. It's just, I mean, come on, this is.
Well, he plays defense like a criminal too, so.
I just you like to avoid the stereotypes as much as you can, but sometimes it writes itself. I mean, come on, this is unbelievable. This is unbelievable stuff.
Oh my goodness.
So,
was he match fixing his own matches?
Yeah, that's the way it seemed, is that he was involved in some way. Again, this happened almost a decade ago when he was in Serie B, but he listen, no statute of limitations, I guess. What are you gonna do? Dom, we did this section or this what do you call this?
Segment.
There you go. Thank you, Dom. That's a geometry teacher in you. Speaking about segments.
Totally different type of segment.
Yes, absolutely. A man who needs a better PR team. We did it for Ollie Watkins a few weeks ago, and I'm sorry to say that Ollie Watkins cooled off after that. So I'm really sorry to Ollie Watkins and anyone depending on him for goal scoring. But, I'm going to tempt fate again, talk about another guy that really I think needs a little more love, needs a little more attention looking in the Serie A. Dom, we'll do the same exercise like we did last time. Who's had a good season in Serie A, specifically a goal scorer? Like, just throw the names at me. Throw the names of the season, the guys that have played so well this year that we just can't stop talking about.
I would say Victor Osimhen, right?
Of course.
The darling.
The darling of Europe, Victor Osimhen. Of course. Great goal scorer.
Are we talking just forwards and wingers in this case?
We're talking a forward. Yeah.
Okay,
so can play as a little bit on the wing, but
so
he's winning the class.
You could say like Rafael Leao, Pedro. Yeah. Let's see, Lautaro Martinez.
Sure, absolutely.
Immobile, who was in a car accident, so he's not scoring too much anymore. Deulofeu.
Sure, absolutely. Dom, I would just like to say, I love the names that you've thrown out here, right? And I love where your head's at. And you love this team. You have a tendency to love Salernitana. I don't know what it is, but you have.
Okay, Mazzocchi.
No, close though.
Who's a striker?
And here's my point, Dom. This guy needs better PR. We need to do work for Boulaye Dia.
You know what? Yes, we do. Now that you remind me who they're striking, because when I think of Dia, I still think of him in the Premier League. I completely forget that he's in Serie A playing for Salernitana. And when I watched the Milan game against Salernitana, I always held my breath when he had the ball because he was electric. The guy is talented.
Dom, he has 15 goals in the league this year. Only one of those coming from the penalty spot.
He's so good.
He's got 6 assists as well. If you talk about just goal involvements in general, this is a guy that has been getting it done for Salernitana. Without his goals, they would certainly be in the relegation zone. We've talked, especially early in the season, about someone like Ademola Lookman, right? And how good he's been this year, right? He's outscored him so far. He did have a hat trick against Fiorentina, which of course helps along the way, but he's outscoring Rafa Leao, Kvaratskhelia, Dybala, Beto, who had a very hot start to the season. Ciro Immobile, my preseason pick to be top scorer. Like Dusan Vlahovic, he's outscoring. Come on, give the guy his respect. He's only being outscored by Lautaro and Victor Osimhen, who, by the way, just happen to be two of the most, prolific strikers in all of Europe. It's not even just that they're great within Serie A. These are two guys that I think any club in Europe would be interested in adding to their ranks. You're going to hear a lot about Victor Osimhen this summer, and probably even Lautaro Martinez as well. So Bouladia deserves a lot of love, a lot of respect. Really kind of a breakout year for him. He's 26 years old, right? So he's not a young player finding his way. But we see this sometimes with guys, it might take them the right situation, a good season in terms of maybe a little bit of variance bouncing their way. But 15 goals, he could end the season at the 20-goal mark, which is impressive.
I could get him a transfer to a bigger club as well. Get his. Hey, sometimes some of these Italian clubs, man, the bigger ones will just swoop right in and take somebody.
Well, he's technically on loan from Villarreal, so we'll see. We'll see what his future holds. But he has been a lifeline for Salernitana for sure this season.
Yeah, no, he's been great for them.
And like we said, just hit us up. Hit us up with the PR squad. We will do it for you. We will take care of all this for you. But make sure that everyone knows the name Dia. Let's move to England, shall we? Manchester City won their 8th straight takeover possession of the top spot in the Premier League. It already was theirs to lose, but now it feels, you see the graphic, during the game or like as the table as it stands, and now they sit at the top. And I have noticed that the world seems to have been a little more back to balance now that Manchester City is back upon their perch, it seems. Because that is just where they've occupied a ton of time and space over the last few years. What else is there to say? I'm not going to say it felt inevitable necessarily, because there was definitely a moment I really felt like Arsenal were going to win this title, but they've crumbled away in the last few weeks, a lot by their own design, and now Manchester City are setting their sights on it. Erling Haaland gets his 35th goal. He's just racking up the records and the goals, and I mean, come on, he's just an absolute robot. I remember tweeting a few years ago that there's something very made in a secret lab about Erling Haaland. I still feel that exact same way. This is when he was breaking out at Salzburg, and I had firsthand opportunity to watch him because I remember Liverpool in the same Champions League group that year, and he actually scored against Liverpool. And he's just amazing. I think we can all remember too. I think a year or two before that, he had scored was it 8 or 9 goals in one of the U20 World Cup thing. He has just had this knack for scoring tons and tons of goals and being a spectacular player. And it has been, in some ways, fun, but in some ways terrifying to watch him do that for Manchester City in the Premier League.
You could tell from a young age that, hell, he is young, but when when his time at Salzburg, like you said, you could tell this kid is special. Something about him is just different. I don't know where his ceiling is, to be honest with you. But this is what happens when you have a Viking with Thor running through his veins. Just it's incredible, just absolutely incredible player. And shame on whoever questioned if he could actually do it in the Premier League. Shame on you.
Yeah, hold on. I would like to say, just for the record, because we'll be doing this in a few weeks, we'll be going after our preseason picks. And yes, I did. I picked him. The over-under was 24.5. I said under, but I will defend myself only by saying this. I had concerns about his health because he had a really bad injury streak over the last year and a half with Dortmund. And that was my only reason for picking that. Is I was just betting on a hip or a hamstring or something like that. I don't think I ever questioned his talent.
Hammer the over, man.
You were right.
The over.
Dom, you were right. I was wrong. There you go.
This is a rare time, ladies and gentlemen. Listen.
I think that's what you wanted to hear, so I'm going to let you hear it. I'll even say it again. You were right and I was wrong. Okay?
Listen.
You were right and I was wrong.
This is a special episode of Top Bins Pod today because Matt admitted that I was correct with something.
First of all, I will give you credit when you deserve credit when you say something right. Okay, so let's come on.
Let me bask in this moment. All right,
you did. You listen. You got it right. I was wrong. So shout out to Manchester City, although I don't really mean it. Spurs.
You know what? Check it off your bingo board. All right, I'm mentioning FIFA. we're talking about the top team in England as the Premier League team of the season promo just came out. They made Haaland just absolutely stupid. Like full sprint speed, full finishing. They gave him a 5-star weak foot, 4-star skills. Just absolutely incredible. I mean, and it's credit to what he's been doing this season with Manchester City. He's given them the number 9 that they've been looking for. And Kevin De Bruyne is a happier man because of it. It's just crazy.
Hey, you know what the great news is? He's only 22. You know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's crazy to think that our kids, when they grow up, are going to be having the Haaland Mbappe debate as like we had the Messi Ronaldo debate. It just seems like it's going in that trend.
I do, and this is like putting like this is way early, but I do wonder, like, how seeing Haaland do this does make you think about where he might end up on that list. It is way too early to say that. I'm not going to say that he's going to be better than Messi, Ronaldo, or whatever, but like what he's doing is like pretty special and unprecedented, at least in the Premier League, and you know, especially again, listen, the triple's on for Manchester City. There's no better way to be immortalized than to win a treble. There's not many teams that do it. You know, it's usually a once in a generation thing. You know, in our lifetime, we've seen a few of them, specifically too, like Inter in 2010 and then Bayern in 2013. So, but like, it's really not something that happens often. And, you know, we haven't had one again since those teams. It's not inconceivable that we could this year have the same thing. And I mean, if you're talking about leading the line on that, that's something very, very impressive. So moving on, Spurs go 3-0 down after 15 minutes to Liverpool. And then we saw both sides of both teams in this game. Spurs, their like ability to collapse and just look absolutely terrible within the first 20 minutes and look like the game's over. And Liverpool, we've seen them kind of return back to their previous form where, yes, they can put teams down 3-0 after 15 minutes. That has not been something we've seen out of them enough this year. And then also we saw Spurs in their second half kind of make a comeback and, you know, build some momentum, and Liverpool look clueless defensively and just completely lose grip of the game. And then Spurs get an equalizer in the stoppage time, and Richarlison takes his shirt off, and Diogo Jota goes the other way a minute later and makes it 4-3. And we all leave, I think, a little bit happier.
Spurs are going to Spurs.
Just an unbelievable bad break for Spurs, who just, I think, can't wait for the season to be over. And I do think this is an interesting talk about as well, because Harry Kane, by the way, has had an unbelievable season. He's got 25 goals in the league. And, you know, it hasn't been like his big assist numbers like we're used to over the last few years. But, you know, he's had a really prolific season, almost quietly too, you know, and I do wonder about his future. You know, we know that he obviously tried leaving Spurs was that not this past summer, the summer before, he tried forcing a move, was not successful in doing so. I do wonder if this is a summer that he starts to really consider that, especially since it looks like Spurs are going to be finishing outside the Champions League places, might not be in Europe at all, depending on sort of how the last few weeks shake up. I don't want to do like that is the question. I think there are two destinations in my mind that could be realistic. And one has been rumored for like maybe 2 or 3 years.
United move, right?
No. Although that is the other of the two. The other one that you hear rumors about, and it just seems unlikely, but then you're like, I don't know, you know, they certainly could. Bayern Munich, you know, they need a number 9. And this has not been the first time that he's been linked there. It's happened a few times over the last few years, which is the only reason I really give it any sort of credence. You know, I don't know what it would cost. I would imagine Daniel Levy would be happier to sell him abroad than he would within England, right? There's been rumors too about Real Madrid. I'm not sure I see that because you still have Benzema, and there's really I don't know that
you can't play those two type of forwards together either. So
right. So, but Bayern, I think, would be a really nice fit for him. I think he would fit in that team very well. They certainly need. He's not going to Milan Dom. I'm so sorry. Yeah, but Manchester United is the other one, of course, who have definitely a need for a top striker. So we'll see what happens with Spurs and Kane. And I do feel like this is a summer to reassess if I'm Harry Kane and see Do I want the Premier League all-time scoring record? And do I want to do that at Spurs and maybe not win a trophy, but have that immortalized and be a one-club man, at least for my more senior career, outside of the loans when I was younger? I do wonder if there's that.
Newcastle.
No shot.
Newcastle. They have oil money now, man.
Oh, of course they do, and they don't have nearly enough. They don't have the $200 million it would take for Daniel Levy to sell Harry Kane to them. No shot, and that is out of character for the way that they've built their squad. And by the way, Alexander Isak has been pretty good for them. I think that's a man that they've already bet a lot of money on.
That's true.
I don't think you replace him within a year. I mean, of course, Harry Kane is an upgrade, but I don't know.
Given a hot take,
as if the sheer
you know what I mean.
Could it be more stark?
That would be crazy. Just go to Newcastle, help them challenge for a title against City. 1 year, within the 3 years that Harry Kane would be there for, they win a title. And he has the goal scoring record and all of these accolades come back to Newcastle, and it would be even more sheer. But
yeah,
that's in a fictitious world.
That is in a fictitious world. So we'll see what happens with him and Spurs this summer. Unclear too, what's happening with management with them. They've been trying to get Julian Nagelsmann, who I think would be a great hire. That was someone I was kind of hoping in the post-Klopp era. Might be a guy for Liverpool to be looking at, because I really do think he's a very good manager. Let's talk about the bottom of the table. We've talked enough about greatness today. Let's talk about the good old mud pit at the bottom of the Premier League, baby. Because we got 4 teams now that I think are much closer to being relegated, and that I think, that's not to say that, 4 teams, because not including Southampton, because Southampton in my mind are down. I really don't see a path for them. They'd have to pick up 2 wins at least over the next 4 games, and even that I don't see. Really, they'd have to get 2 wins and a draw and a loss, and hope everyone else loses. Their path is just very, very hard. They're very much down for me. So it's now Leicester, Leeds, Nottingham Forest, and Everton. Leicester and Everton played. It was a 2-2 draw. Really doesn't help either team. Both of them really needed to get 3 points out of that. A draw does not do a ton for them. It moved Leicester out of the relegation spots, which it's nice for them, of course. But really, both of them needed 3 points. It was a classic 6-pointer at this stage of the season. I wanted to just talk about the run-ins, because all of them have some challenges here. So Leicester have Fulham away, Liverpool at home, Newcastle away, and West Ham at home. Dom, just your gut feeling, how many points are they getting from Fulham away, Liverpool home, Newcastle away, and West Ham home?
4.
4 points. That is, I think it's being generous, but I like it. Okay. Leeds have City away, Newcastle home, West Ham away, and Spurs home. And they have Sam Allardyce taking over after Javi Gracia was fired, despite
1 point.
him. 1 point for Leeds. Okay, Nottingham Forest have Southampton at home, Chelsea away, Arsenal at home, Crystal Palace away on the final day of the season.
4.
4 for Nottingham Forest. And Everton have Brighton away, Manchester City at home, Wolves away, and Bournemouth at home on the final day.
1.
Oof. Not much faith.
No, I don't have much faith for them. Brighton will beat them. City will beat them. The Wolves would beat them the way that they're playing right now. And that's why I think that the Bournemouth tie would be there. Or if it's a tie, it would be with Wolves, and Bournemouth would beat them, because Bournemouth is playing some decent football right now. So I don't see much going on for Everton or Leeds.
So with those results, Leeds and Everton and Southampton would all be going down, which I don't think is really any of these, again, outside of Southampton, any of these 4, I think could go down. That has been the feeling over the last 2 months, has been really there's a lot of teams that could go down, and some of them have done enough, like West Ham and Bournemouth, like you mentioned, and Wolves, to separate themselves from that pack. But honestly, I think any of Leicester, Leeds, Nottingham Forest, Everton, and Southampton could go down. And I not only would I not be shocked, I think it's deserving. I think they've all been terrible in their own kind of special and unique ways. And, I am curious to see how the relegation battle is going to kind of shape up here because, I just I think Leeds have by far the hardest because City is always going to be tough no matter who you are, but they're obviously trying to clinch a title, so they still have a lot to play for. Newcastle, West Ham, Spurs, all pretty good teams. That are going to give you a tough game no matter what. Everton have a really tough stretch too. Brighton away, Manchester City at home, but then Wolves and Bournemouth. Bournemouth on the last day, they're safe. You might see it's always kind of a toss up between teams that are safe on the last day that are kind of comfortably mid table. Sometimes they roll over very easily. Sometimes they have nothing to not play for, and I think there's a little bit of freedom in that, and are willing to maybe take risks and go out there and give on a good performance. So it's going to be interesting to see how the relegation battle shapes up because really top four is kind of settled in England as well. There could obviously still be some shakeups, but teams like Newcastle United and Manchester United have done enough to qualify for next season's Champions League. We'll see if Brighton maybe make a late run at that. Liverpool seem unlikely. They'd have to have a lot go their way to find themselves in the top four. So it seems like City, Arsenal, Newcastle, and Manchester United are going to be representing England in the Champions League next year. Man, what a season it has been in the Premier League. Technically title race is still on. I think we've all mentally sort of checked out, but technically Arsenal could still win the title. That is not inconceivable too. That would definitely be
I would love to see that happen, but who knows?
Let's look ahead this weekend.
I don't see it happening.
Let's look ahead this weekend at the Premier League because we do have Arsenal chasing a title against Newcastle United. That has given us some fireworks over the last few times. I can remember last year around this time, Newcastle just absolutely dominating Arsenal as part of their collapse outside of the top four race. Fitting that could happen again, but this time really putting the nail in their coffin in the title race. Also got West Ham versus Manchester United. Feels like it's always a pretty interesting game. As far as relegation, battles looking at, we've got Nottingham Forest versus Southampton. Nottingham Forest really need to be picking up 3 points from this game. It is really their best opportunity at getting a win when you look at the rest of their season. It could do a lot to keep them safe. You got Leicester playing Fulham. That's obviously a tough match. And Everton against Brighton, like we highlighted as well. And Leeds against Manchester City. Good luck. Bournemouth could overtake Chelsea in the in the table here with a win over the weekend. Who would have had? If you had told a Bournemouth fan at the beginning of the season they have the potential to go above Chelsea in like game week 34 or 35.
Listen,
what place do you think that a Bournemouth fan is thinking that they're potentially moving into? Probably like third, right? I mean,
oi, we're going to the Europa League. Like, dude, that's crazy. Yeah, no way, dude. And not only Bournemouth, but a win for Wolves this week against Villa could also do it. But Villa's been in some decent form. Wolves as well, a little bit. 3 wins in their last 5. Same thing with Villa, though. 3 wins with their last 5. So if Chelsea lose, Bournemouth gets a win and Wolves gets a win, Chelsea could end up in 14th.
I think it would be hilarious if Chelsea get sucked into a relegation battle. So I think that'd actually be really funny.
I would absolutely love that.
Absolutely. So that's what we have to look forward to this weekend. A lot of great games in Italy, like we highlighted already. I mean, it is. I think that is the place for all your action this weekend. A lot of box office stuff there. We will be back next week to break it all down for you. Also, some Champions League, action we'll have had. We'll have a little more answers on who might be headed towards the final in early June. But until then, keep it safe, keep it locked, keep it loaded. I don't know why I said that. We'll see you next time.